Hey, friends, this is John Geanangel, and I'm on the Bonsai Time podcast coming to you from Gaston, South Carolina. Bonsai on, and I hope to see you soon at the ABS Learning Symposium in Asheville. Thank you, guys.
Hello, and welcome to the Bonsai Time podcast, a tree hugger spot for history, horticulture, and having fun. I'm your host, Kevin, and in today's episode, you'll find Ryan and I catching up on life, and then jump into talking with a multi-talented former school teacher, master of rock slabs, forest plantings, and South Carolina Yamadori collector, Mr. John Geanangel. John shared with us his bonsai origin story, how it led to becoming a headlining artist, and what you can expect when attending the Bonsai and Blue Ridge Convention in 2026. He also shared with us the behind-the-scenes preparations that went into his 3 bald cypress workshops there. But before we dive into that, let's briefly share what's going on with your hosts. I, Kevin, am finally settling down for a long New England winter, and have started pursuing bonsai outreach opportunities in the Berkshires and beyond. Ryan is still burning the midnight oil towards finishing his degree, and he's also hosting a beginner workshop and presentation to his local bonsai society on Deadwood this January in Columbus, Ohio. Kelly is working her trees as she can with that California weather that she has. Lastly, your bonsai bulletin. Winter is a quiet time for bonsai shows, but the next American Bonsai Society convention discussed in this episode is June 4th to the 7th, 2026 in Asheville, North Carolina. And they just opened registration. Full details will be linked in the show notes. If you'd like us to shout out your upcoming bonsai event, contact us via Gmail at bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com or our website, bonsaitimepodcast.com, or on our socials in the show notes. Without further ado, here's John Geanangel. How have you been? I have been so busy. What's new?
Yeah, I've been good. I've been working a lot. Lately, I've been in a more relaxed phase a little bit, like the last
Good.
couple weeks since the CVS show. I haven't had any shows to stress about in August, so that's been good. Um, so yeah, I've been still doing a lot of lab work, but having a little more time to slow down, get tea bags made for all my trees, post more things on my Etsy and things like that, like these little things that sometimes they fall through the cracks. So
Yeah.
yeah.
We're settling in pretty well in
So you're in
Williamstown,
your
Mass.
final destination now?
For right now. We don't
Oh,
know what the
for
future
this year. That's what I mean.
holds. This year, yeah, maybe next year. We don't know for sure. Contract
Mm,
work is contract work. So,
right.
um, I think I maybe told you and Kelly, and for listeners, Kelly's not here today. She had some work
Mm,
meetings, so she says hi. But um, I maybe mentioned to you all that when I was in Japan in February, before I got notification I lost my job and all, I went to the Kokufu, and while I was there, I got interviewed by a couple different networks, camera people and all. Had no idea what happened to it, and had no idea what it came about with it until yesterday, the day before. I got a message from a friend from high school I haven't seen in like probably 20 years, almost 20 years next year. And it was this link with Kimura's face on it. I was like, what? Oh, okay, I'll watch it later. It was like the middle of the night. I'm not going to watch this. And my friend's like, hey, I don't know if you saw this, but it made me think of you, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, I haven't talked to you in a long time, but okay, cool. I'm glad you reached out specifically with bonsai. And then, a fellow friend of ours, Brian Six, posted something on a Discord chat that we're in, and it was the same link. I was like, what is this about? And then people kept mentioning my name. I was like, what? I'm like, yeah, I don't know what happened to it. And then I was like, oh, I'll watch this. And, uh, you know, my wife and daughter, we all watched it. And I was like, wait, that's me on the screen. Like I'm on NHK. I'm on Japanese television.
wow.
Like it was weird because, the first pan, if anybody's watched it, I don't know, not that I'm boasting about it, it's just weird because like my in-laws were like, "You're on TV in Japan." And and it was like the first scene was like me looking at the tree, like I was just looking at the tree underneath, just looking at the wire work and seeing studying the tree, if you will. The next thing I know, I see he's in there. I was like, "Oh, Tony Bebb, Mr. Tony Bebb, cool." Got to meet him and his wife when I was there. And then next thing you know, the next person talking is me. I'm like, oh, that person looks familiar. Oh, that's
Mm.
me. And, wife and daughter are like, oh my gosh, it's Dada. Oh, it's you. Oh my God. I was like, that's weird. And now it's forever. Just, I've never met Kimura. I've seen him in real life and all these things. And
How have you enjoyed this year where you've not been in charge of watering any trees, really, you know? I mean, not any of your own trees. You've kind of been traveling around different places.
to be candid, I've been really depressed actually.
We'll have to find that link and put it in the show notes or something.
With the NHK links, they do expire. Like
Oh,
there was
really?
one about Kobayashi that's like no longer available. I was like, what?
Mm,
And so if it's out there, you should watch it if you want. It's a good little
mm,
documentary. I met the person who made it. She was really good. She also does wushu, which is like a martial arts competitive form. Anyways, yeah, so it's just been, I'm gonna be a full-time dad. It's pretty cool, but I don't know. We're just shooting the poo until John gets on, so to speak. But yeah, I don't
mm,
know. I'm gonna be honest. I told my wife yesterday and this last weekend. It's like I really miss my trees. You know, I miss
lost the
I
routine.
not only that, but I feels like a part of me is missing in
Mm,
relation of like when we first started. We talked about finding our personality in our trees, right?
mm,
I was starting to find that and getting trees into more out of development into refinement and things in that way. And I know it'll still be there, but it's the position that lost the job and then had to completely liquidate my whole collection, which most of those I started with back 10 plus years ago. Not to say it's by any length of time long, but it's still not short.
mm,
And I'm still going through it. It's not like a loss, like, oh, woe is me, but it's still that kind of thing where it's what do I do now? I have a few trees I dink around with, but I did start skateboarding again as a different outlet and approach to get my mental to think about artistic creations because that's what I used to do is skateboarding.
mm,
And that helped me view the world in a completely different 180 than most people because skateboarding, you're thinking about things as a skateboarder sense, like I could ride on that, I could do that, I could do
mm.
that. And that's how I transitioned into my trees was because I broke my elbow 10 years later, I'm doing bonsai because right before I broke my elbow, wasn't doing bonsai. And then I met my now wife right after I broke my elbow. And then I got into bonsai shortly after that as a full-time life thing. And I figured it's better to go full circle and come back around. And I think that will help me further my expansion into more creative outlets within bonsai and also see if I can intertwine bonsai with more skateboarding tactics and people and things in that way. The therapy aspect of it too. You know, I don't know. It's a lot of thinking time, future things. You know, I thought about writing a movie script about some bonsai artist finding his way or something. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but I mean, if you got time to explore different things like that, that could be definitely an enjoyable thing to pursue, and you never know what it might turn into.
Well, and you know as well as anybody that I've got a lot of ideas in my brain,
Yeah,
more than
yeah.
most some days, which is good and or bad because I jump too far into the future.
It's kind of a matter of deciding which ideas are worth pursuing. Like lately, there was at least one dream where I had an idea for an app, and it was like very multifunctional app. And I was like, do I want to spend my time on that? Is that worth doing? Like, does the world need that? We don't already have that, you know? So you
Mhm.
have to, every time you have an idea, you have to evaluate, okay, is it something that is worth my time, or is it a good idea or a bad idea? They can't all be good. So,
And with those two, I've thought about those in relation of what if we put ideas out to the world, like we have a podcast here and people listen. Don't know how many people listen or do or whatnot. I don't care. But that idea that we may not be following through with that we talk about may influence somebody else to
mm,
take it on or change it or
yeah,
have an impact in some way. At least that's my hope, my wish, desire. But you know, there's something to it.
yeah. One thing I have heard though, and this is something I think about a lot when it comes to podcasting, because it's like kind of a concept that talk is cheap and then the
Mm,
action is where the real value is. So
mhm.
then in my own personal reflection, I'm like, is it worth spending a million hours? Not really that much, but spending all this time podcasting, talking to random people. It's enjoyable, and other people enjoy listening to it, but is it helping people get better and advance their bonsai?
It's funny you
But
say that. I've had the
oh,
same idea too. Just this last week, I'm like, what are we doing?
yeah. And sometimes I listen to podcasts where I'm just like, well, I know the host, and so we have that pseudo-social relationship where I'm just like listening to them blab and I don't have to pay attention to what they're saying, but it's just kind of like a habit now. So there's nothing wrong with that. Uh, and sometimes maybe they'll say something that I'm like, oh, that's really insightful. So maybe there's good and neutral things about it, as long as it's not really affecting your mental state into negative emotions, then no harm really. But I think where I was going with this was a concept that ideas that are original are a lot more rare than people think, you know,
Yeah,
where a lot of people have an idea and then they just don't pursue it.
yeah.
So that's where you can stand out more
Well,
if
and the
you
other
find an
concept is
idea that
too,
you really want to pursue.
is any thought or idea we've had never been thought or thunk before?
Is one thing that you don't know because you can't interview
It's the hard
everybody,
part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
Mr. John Geanangel, it's been a while. I've wanted to meet you. Well, now in person. I know Ryan studied with you a bit, and I've heard about you through people. I did a little bit of study with Dave Hutchins down in Florida and a few people down there. Met Rodney Clemens 2 years ago now, and they were
Okay.
talking very, very highly of you and both
Um,
Cypress and things in that way.
they're all liars.
So good friends are.
No, those guys are good people. So, right.
I thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. I know you did one with Ryan Neal, I think it was, and a few other guys on that one. That was a good one. Listen to that
Good.
episode.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So,
So yeah, I know that you had your podcast interview that Kevin mentioned where you and several other people were talking with Ryan Neal on his podcast about bald cypress versus pond cypress. So you have a kind of varied experience, but that's one of your areas of expertise. But what we were more interested to do in this episode today is to get to know you as a person and hear about your background in bonsai especially because I've seen a lot of your work on Facebook and everything, but uh, I think even when I went to see you and kind of learn at your garden for a little bit, I didn't know exactly how you got into bonsai or studied under to get to where you are today. Um, and
sure.
and
Go
I
ahead.
the other thing that I was going to mention was that next year you're a headliner for an ABS show, so you've kind of made it in your neck of the woods now, huh? So
um,
people need to know who you are, I guess.
well, so um, I watched that silly movie back in, I don't know, the mid 80s and sometime around 1988. On the side of the road, there was a white van with a red sign that said Bonsai, and I stopped, and this was in Houston, Texas. And it was just about a week before I was moving to South Carolina. I was being transferred with my my job at that time. And so I bought a tree, and I really, looking back on it, I think it was dead when I got it because it was crispy within about 2 weeks. So I'm now what I know about junipers, I know, it was hurt, a couple months ago to be crispy in 2 weeks after I got it. But anyhow,
Mm.
it started the fire. And I started doing some research. This is 1988, so there wasn't any internet to research on. I went to the libraries and checked out books. I went to local nurseries, and when I went to local nurseries, I found a connection, a man named Tom Dimmick. And Tom is still around, but not really doing bonsai anymore. I'm pretty sure Tom went to the Art Institute in Rochester, and at that time he like apprenticed himself with Bill Valvanus. And when I met him, he was teaching ceramics at the University of South Carolina. Um, so he had a whole backyard full of bonsai trees, and so I started doing everything I could to be in his favor. You know, I mowed his yard. I did, you know, I took his trash. I did, you know, when he was out of town, I'd go water his trees so his wife didn't have to do it. And, you know,
Sweat equity, it's called, right?
that's right. That's right. So I didn't know how else to learn, you know. So I
Yeah.
was pretty much not, you know, didn't have a lot of money at the time to spend on the hobby or anything. I was trying to do it DIY. I think you guys are some, you know, Brian at least. I know you're in that kind of heart too.
Yeah, I was gonna
Same.
say that
Yeah,
sounds
yeah.
familiar.
I was like, I think everyone should do that, you know, at least some part of their time.
Yeah,
Look lost
absolutely.
on today, you know.
Absolutely. So, and it was a good experience. You know, I felt like, you know, I'd work for 3 hours and I'd get 30 minutes. So I'm not sure, but you know, I'm not complaining. I was very appreciative and I still am appreciative of everything Tom did for me. But eventually a couple things happened. We started a club here in Columbia, South Carolina. That was like maybe 1991 or 1992. And Tom eventually introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Ken Duncan. And at that time, Ken had been doing bonsai pretty much by himself. He went to see Yuji Yoshimura at a bonsai convention in Atlanta in 1973. You need to get out of the way, buddy. I'm sorry, my cat jumped up my face. So anyhow, he introduced me to Ken, and Ken and I really credit Ken a lot for what I've, you know, my introduction into bonsai, and then also just being that bonsai buddy that was willing to go to the swamp or willing to go collecting, or willing to, you know, go to the show or whatever. And I learned so much from him. He's a propagation master. I mean, he can air layer, make cuttings of anything. I mean, it's just amazing. So I learned a lot from Ken, but at the same time, our club, we regularly studied with several artists. Bill Valvanus was one of the main ones that would come down a couple times a year at that time. And we'd do workshops and, you know, private workshops. Eventually, after 15 years, our club, the, you know, typical club scene, 5 or 6 people worked really hard to keep a bunch of other people happy. And we all got tired of it, myself included. So we started a study group. And at that time, we really started working a lot with Kathy Shaner. And I credit a lot of kind of my, you know, movement from, and maybe I'm not there, but my movement from kind of an average to a more serious bonsai artist to her. She helped me see a few things and encouraged me, you know, when I needed it. So that was nice.
So is Kathy Shaner, her name's familiar. Is she the one that's in like a curator of a collection in California, and she would travel to you for these study group meetings, or?
Yeah, at one time. So Kathy was one of the early apprentices that went to Japan, and she spent 8 years in Japan as an apprentice to a what?
The Mitsuya?
Yes, there you go. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything of him other than what she said. And I think she respected him, but at the same time, because she was a woman, she had a very different path on, you know, I think she was expected to do a lot in his family, in addition to learning, you know, helping with bonsai. But anyhow, no, I mean, I shouldn't even talk about that. But yes, Kathy trained in Japan. She was the curator of one of the big collections, maybe the Huntington collection in California.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's no longer there. She has, I don't know, she has a home in Alabama, and she has friends I think she stays with occasionally in California. I'm not sure where she is now. I hope somebody might comment on this podcast if they know. I've heard that she's not in good health. So I'd like to hear more about that if somebody knows that.
Well, if
I've
we
heard
hear
that. I've
anything,
heard that
we'll
too,
forward
actually.
it along to you.
Yeah. So
So some of you said, silly video or movie you watched. Was it by chance The Karate Kid?
oh, of course,
Of
yeah.
course, I didn't want to assume because
Yeah,
our
yeah.
friend Ryan here still has never seen it. So,
Oh, poor guy.
he's fallen behind on the history there.
There-
I've been trying to get him on that, but not yet. He's busy with the PhD, so I'll give it to him.
Maybe next year I'll have time.
There you
Yeah,
go.
we'll do a
There-
group watch.
I
Invite
gotta
over.
marathon all of them because now they've got a bunch of sequels, right?
There's a scene in that movie.
There's like a TV series now.
Yeah, but it's so far removed. The second one I think is more focused on the bonsai because they do the business, right? I think.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, it got so many people into it.
In the
mm.
first one, there's a scene where Mr. Miyagi's in a basement of an apartment complex, and he's got what looks like a dwarf Alberta spruce sitting in front of him, just a conical Christmas tree. Well, the movie goes away with the kid, and when they come back, supposedly he's created this, what really looks like a nice representation of a pine, a tall, nice pine tree.
Oh, all wired out and branches down and
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, yeah. It was not the same tree, obviously, but
Mm.
I looked at that and I said, man, I need to learn how to do that. I just need to learn how to do that. So
I
that's
think I think
kind of what fired it off for me.
I think they call that movie magic, right?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. So something about that spoke to you, I guess.
It did. It
Maybe
did.
you
The
didn't know
fact that
why at the time.
I didn't. And I really never and still don't really consider myself that artistic. Um, I hate to say it, but I do bonsai. I just take it one branch at a time. And try to make every branch as good as it can be. And
Do you view it more like yourself doing one thing as your own art or more craft than to art?
well,
Not to put words on it, but just for clarification.
you know, I'd like to think some of it leans towards art, but I think that is not my determination. I
Mhm.
think that might be the viewer's determination. Um, um, I like to, I have, I think people can appreciate and do whatever kind of bonsai makes them happy.
Mm.
I've moved beyond the Japanese, influence. No, I don't want to say influence, but the typical Japanese trees, I have little interest in anymore. I want to make trees, like Ryan's got in the picture behind him
Mm.
that are places that I've been that interest me. I have, and this is probably a silly story, but it's meaningful to me. Years and years ago, when I first started doing bonsai, so this was probably the late 80s, maybe 89, maybe 90. I was married at the time, and her parents had a place in Gatlinburg, and we would go visit Gatlinburg, and right next to Gatlinburg is Pigeon Forge, and there was a bonsai nursery in Pigeon Forge. The man's name was Charles, and he'd been doing it a really long time. He had some really nice looking trees, and I was flabbergasted that they were $300, you know?
Inflation now, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to learn from him what I can. I don't know, I'm just there for a visit. It's, maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half if I'm lucky. And so I asked him, I said, if you don't mind me asking, I really want to understand what makes a bonsai good. And he kind of looked at me, and of course he's wearing a kimono.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, so I
He
mean,
was serious about it.
definitely,
Something.
the Asian thing going on,
Mm, mm, mm.
but he finally looks at me and says, you can have a picnic under a good bonsai tree.
Wow.
And I didn't say wow. I just
Huh.
said like, okay, whatever. I didn't really get it,
Mm.
but I remembered it, and later I thought about it, and I thought, oh man, he said that so well. A bonsai tree is is a composition of things that allow you to visit someplace you've been before, or someplace you might be in your imagination, or, it takes you to nature. It takes you to something that really hopefully moves you. I hope when I make trees that sometimes they move people who look at them, but ultimately it's about what I see, and my experiences. So
It got me thinking about a tree sitting underneath. I just had a picnic with my daughter the other day, and I was like, tree in our front yard right now is not the best tree, but it still looks like something that's haggard. It's like, new iteration of thought.
yeah. So at some point in the future, when you have that nice deciduous tree and you look at it and say, oh, that reminds me of having that picnic with my daughter. So
that's a good point.
that's what bonsai should do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Ryan and I had a thing we wanted to try, is getting a more community outreach. When I was in Ohio, it didn't pan out just because of timing and studies, of course. We wanted to go into rehabilitation centers or retirement homes and do bonsai therapy kind of deal, where we would do trees and have the crowd direct us how they wanted it to look. And we got a lot of good information out about it and people really interested, but like I said, it just didn't pan out. But have you, in your time of all these things you've done, have you done any community outreach or anything that way, or taught kids or anything?
So my background is public education. So I just retired this year from
Congratulations.
in K-12 I retired 1 year early. So I worked for 27 years, and I did everything from teach 3rd to 6th grade. I taught gifted programs. And then my big stint was I was a technology specialist. I didn't repair. I taught people how to, at that point, it was grade books and PowerPoint and Word and file management. And, it eventually evolved into more, but eventually the district said, no, we're not going to do that. We're never going to go. I was at elementary, and they said, we're never going to do one-to-one at elementary. So they ended the program. The next year we had COVID, and they went full one-to-one at elementary. And none of them would come back. So
how the tables have turned.
Yeah. The last part of my career was being a homebound teacher. So when kids are sick, injured, having some kind of problem that keeps them out of school, I would team with their teachers at school and help them learn at home and test and do things like that. And that was extremely rewarding, because, working one-on-one with kids, even the most challenging, is so much different than working in a classroom. They're one-on-one, they have your full attention. So there's no behavior problems, you're right there with them and you can deal with them. So that I had all kinds of kids, I had, special needs children and regular ed kids, and, kids that were, I loved the kids that were all in the advanced classes, because they never needed my help, they just somebody kind of keep them on track. But I didn't have to go to, I didn't have to try to teach them calculus and stuff like that. So that was good.
Did you ever find yourself bringing a tree in the classroom ever? Or just talking about it?
I kind of got away from your question. So
no, you're good. You're good.
I absolutely. The first elementary school I taught Japanese language, and we had a Japanese fest every year. And I presented a presentation on bonsai to every child in that school for 4 or 5 years straight. And had some of the greatest things. I put up I showed an early bald cypress water elm mixed group planting, and this little kid, I'll never forget, said, man, that looks like Santee. And I was just like, oh, that's exactly what, that was my inspiration, is a couple of lakes in the middle part of South Carolina. And yeah, my daddy takes me fishing there all the time, you know. So to me, that was a good nod as to, you know, what I was doing was working. This kid recognized,
Mm,
you know, the inspiration. So anyhow, sorry.
that's awesome.
Sounds like you had a good test audience because, you know, kids are very unfiltered. So,
Oh, they
Yeah.
are. They are.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I I even did I went to a middle school for like 5 separate sessions. I think they were about an hour each where we studied bonsai, we studied trees, we studied some of the history. You know, we looked at, you know, and I brought in a bunch of trees. We never had the right situation for them to actually work on them, but
Mm,
that would have been fun. Um, uh, so yes, I've had a lot. So later on, when I was the technology integration specialist, I was housed in the media center, the library. So that gave me a perfect platform. I could bring my trees in, and put them up on top of the bookshelves, you know, where the kids could see them. And they were always extremely respectful and thought they were cool. And, you know, several other, you know, I had several times I had moms reach out and say, hey, you know, little Joey's interested in your bonsai. What can we, you know, what can we do? So, so yeah, that was always. I have been involved in sharing with kids for a long time. You guys mentioned the ABS thing. You know, for
mm.
20 years, my buddy Ken and I did presentations all over the Southeast. We went from Virginia to Florida. We did presentations at the Carolina Bonsai Expo, 23 of the 24 years that it was held. So
wow.
uh, I kind of backed out of doing that kind of stuff a few years ago, maybe probably almost a decade ago. And now that I'm retired, I'm probably going to be open to doing a little bit more. So we'll see. I really like teaching one-on-one in my studio. It's a great way to learn. Ryan, you've experienced it, or you experienced one day anyhow.
Yeah. I wish I lived closer. I could come over more often.
But I've had good success. I've done some one-on-one forest workshops. I've done one-on-one bald cypress, azalea, slab plantings. So lots of different things, and those I'm really enjoying those. So that's
How
how
do
I
you,
focus my time.
I was gonna ask, how do you quantify the students you're teaching, they're receiving what you're teaching and then taking it home and learning more from it? Like, how do you check in with them after the class? Like, oh, hey, what were 3 things you learned that was either new or
No,
relearned or
no.
see?
You know, to me, I'm there to answer their questions if they have more questions, but I'm not going to follow up with them and quiz them. You know,
Okay.
it's not my style. You know, that feels very, you know, if you were, you know, that feels like more of a long-term kind of learning situation, you know.
Mm, mm.
I do
Not
have,
one day.
yeah, I do have a few students that call them students. They're really more like bonsai friends that come and help in the nursery. And, you know, sometimes we work on my stuff and sometimes we work on their stuff. And it's, you know, that's always enjoyable. And I might ask them a question like that, or, you know, the next time I'll say, okay, you know, what did we talk about last time? Or, you know, what do we do in this situation? So, you know, I certainly understand how people learn, but I'm not always, um, you know, it's a little different to or
I think we
doing
lost.
things for a hobby.
John, can you
Think,
So,
say again what you just said? It was kind of choppy there.
okay.
Mm.
I think there's a big difference between teaching in the education system, you know, where you have
mm,
accountability, you know, and doing
right.
the things Kevin's talking about, and, you know, teaching someone, helping someone that's a hobbyist that just wants to learn a little bit, I think is a little more informal. And, you know, if you were an apprentice for Ryan or Bjorn or whoever, Tyler, maybe that might be different, but I'm much more informal than that typically.
Yeah, that brings up a related question I had. So I was wondering if teaching bonsai to your kids, if that informed how you teach it in your workshops or in your lectures that you've given to clubs. Like, have you adapted any strategies that you normally use in your teaching career or gone from one way to the other with those teaching techniques?
I think the teaching techniques certainly go in both directions, to the kids and to the my bonsai friends. But I'm not sure there's a huge amount of overlap. The audience is kind of different. Kids you're trying to entertain and keep their interest, and they're, it's a little different when you're dealing with somebody that has a big interest in bonsai already. So I think hands-on experience is really, really important, but some people will still say, I don't want to have you tell me what to do. I want to watch you do it. Okay, I'm fine with that. Watch me do it, watch me, and then let's do it together. And then you do it on your own. I think is a pretty solid way to help somebody learn a specific technique or do something like that. So, watch it, then let's do it with help, and then let's let them do it on their own. So,
yeah, that's pretty much how we train people in my research lab also. It's kind of like the first time you take notes while I do it, and then I'll let you do it and I'll watch and see if I can help you catch any mistakes. And then after that, I say, okay, you go do it on your own and I'll be here if you have any questions, basically. But
we always call that the GER model.
yeah.
Gradual release of responsibility.
Ah, so there's a name for it. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. I was just waiting for it, and then we pull out the stick and say, "Do better."
Do better. That's a powerful statement. Better.
Especially in the lab, I'm sure, Ryan, right? It's always a consistent theme.
My
Don't
wife
contaminate anything.
My wife also just retired, but she worked in a kindergarten.
Oh, nice.
And that was one of their very powerful statements. Look at the kid square in the face and say, "Do better." And that was 90% of the kids, that was a big motivating factor. 10% of them just laughed at you.
That's funny. How did you get involved with ABS? I'm on the board myself, again, right now, helping out with the new talent contest outreach. And as I'm sure you're well aware of, John, is that they'll put you in many different places. It's with all things just coming together. So do this one thing, but also this if you can. Did you just get asked to be on, or did you ask to
I'm
be on
actually
yourself?
not even a member of ABS. I'm ashamed to say. I'm dropping my head.
There's still time.
Do better. I need to do better. Dan O'Neill is in charge. Do you know Dan? Have you met?
I think there's so many people on the board now, it's hard to keep track of names these days. But I'm
Dan
pretty sure.
Martinberg, and he's the local contact for the local person in charge of the learning symposium next year. So Dan and I have been friends for decades. And so as soon as he got involved, he asked me if I would consider, and I'll have to be honest with you, I'm not even sure at this time who else is going to be there. I think Bjorn is going to be there. That's what I was told a couple of times. And even Bjorn's dad told me that he was looking forward to it because he was going to be there. But I don't know who else is going to be there. I heard at one time Sergio would be there. I also heard Andrew Robson. But at this point, I really don't know. I'm sorry. I should have done better.
So Kevin or maybe John, either of you know this. How do they plan those? Is it in coordination with the local clubs and then they can get help planning it that way, or is it ABS strictly doing the planning?
I can tell you about this situation. In this situation, it's a three-way team. The Blue Ridge Bonsai Society, who Dan is a part of, is very intricately involved, and they're playing a huge, absolute big role. The North Carolina Arboretum, which is where the event's going to be held, is also in partnership. They have a nice bonsai exhibit garden. Arthur Jura is the curator there. And, this is, they're not doing the Carolina Bonsai Expo, and the Blue Ridge Bonsai Society would really like to see that come back in some fashion. So I think they were actively seeking opportunities, and somehow this thing with ABS worked out. Felix Laughlin is another one that's involved, and I don't know if he's in ABS, but he was a big member of the National Bonsai Foundation for a long time. So he's a member of that club. Scott Barboza is working through as the ABS, one of the ABS people, I think, involved. I've worked a lot with Scott and Dan planning the workshops I'm going to be doing. And we have a demo with one, I guess, Friday night. There'll be three of us up on stage doing a three-way demo. So looking forward to that. Again, I don't know who exactly I'll be on stage with, but I'm sure that'll be fun. Nice to have other people up there so you can get some work done and not have to talk constantly.
Yeah.
Make fun of each other too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And speaking of your workshop, I think I saw on your Facebook it's going to be a bald cypress workshop. Is that right?
I have three separate workshops and a demo. I'm doing one storm damaged flat top workshop. These are going to be trees that are going to already have a hollowed trunk. We'll design the top in the workshop and give them their first wiring. That's an all-day workshop on Saturday. I've got some spectacular material for those workshops, some great bases. The second workshop is what I'm calling a care and refinement workshop. These are going to be trees for somebody who is, wanting to jump in a little deeper to start with. These are trees I've worked on for a couple of years. So, and they're in a variety of sizes, but the workshop will be about, more about refinement and keeping them in good shape and keeping them healthy and dealing with pests and, soils. And I'm hoping, hint, guys, I'm hoping my buddies Eli and Rob and Preston might join me in that workshop so we could talk about some pot choices with those trees. So keep that in mind, guys, if you're listening. The third
I just got them.
Go ahead.
Just real quick. I just got to meet Eli and Mr. Robert Wallace this last couple of months. They're really nice, and I'll tell them too.
That's great, guys. So I've known Rob for a really long time. Eli and I have a great story about how we met. He used to work for a country band, and he was watching my YouTube videos. That's another way I tried to teach for a while, was doing YouTube videos. And if you've seen them, I'm sorry, because the stuff now is so much better and has such better quality, and I'm talking across pictures. So anyhow, he came to me and said, "Hey man," and I'd been dealing with all kinds of jerks writing stupid comments and just frustrating stuff. And Eli finds my email address on his own, reaches out and says, "Hey man, I've really been enjoying your bonsai videos. I'd like to treat you to a concert and dinner one night."
Wow.
I'm like, what's the catch? What's it going to cost me? What's the deal? Man, he totally hooked us up. My wife and I got to go see a Zach Brown concert, and it was a food fest weekend in Charleston, and he totally hooked us up and hooked us up multiple times after that. But you know, he wanted to know about bonsai from that point. So I told him, I said, look, I'm happy to teach you whatever, but you got the best teacher around right in town. He lives in Atlanta. I said, you need to look up Rodney Clemens. And
Mm.
they became great buds. So at first it was a teacher student, and then they became good friends and did a lot of traveling together. And so I feel responsible for that. I take responsibility for that.
Wear it with pride. Wear it with pride.
So
So
how many or where around what time do you think it was that you got into the YouTube videos? Just wondering because you said it was a while
2006,
ago.
maybe. So 2006, so almost 20 years ago, I was
Wow.
Mm.
making YouTube videos.
Maybe one of the first bonsai people on YouTube then at that time.
I wasn't. Uh, Shortly after my videos started, Bjorn started some. There was another guy. Oh, golly, he was great. He was an old guy that lived in a trailer that potted. He lived in Florida, so it was all tropical stuff. And he just crammed sphagnum moss in with everything. It was crazy. Didn't have a lot of competition, so people really liked my videos. It didn't take long before, it finally got to the point where making the videos got in the way of me working on the trees, and I had to make a
Mm.
choice. And
Yeah.
so at that point, I said, okay, I'm backing off. And I did a few more, but I didn't, every time I started working on a tree, I wasn't planning out a video and then having to work on the tree and then edit the video or, whatever it might be. It got to be more and more work. So I got lazy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I've
Yeah.
gone through a little bit of the same. Like I had some phases where I filmed a lot of my bonsai work, and then I never made time to really edit them. I'm like, maybe one day when I graduate, I'll try to get some of those out. But now
And
some
when
of
do you
those trees
graduate?
have not survived. So then I know how the story ends, you know?
Uh,
I'm like, okay, well now I know that that might have been a mistake, or if I go back and edit it, I would narrate it a little bit differently, you know?
Just make a highlight reel.
there
Yeah.
you go. There you go.
But
But
John, you were saying about a third workshop or something or other. I didn't mean to interrupt you back there.
Third workshop. Boy, this is going to sound crazy, but I tested it for the last 2 summers and I think it's going to work great. I'm going to do a bald cypress forest planting workshop in June.
Oh,
So, I'm going to defoliate and wire the trees and root prune them prior to the workshop. So, that's a big commitment, but, because I'll have to do that, just the week before the workshop. But I'm ready to do it. And I'm going to use Robert Wallace container. We're going to do 7 to 9. These are seedlings that I grew through CDs and have been trained. They've been trained. Have been wire trained at least twice, if not 3 times, prior to the workshop. So they're going to look like the tall, thin flat tops like Ryan has behind him, or similar to that. As a kind of forest planting. I'm going to use a real shallow tray. I'm going to use plastic grids to screw the trees to. Because they've grown through a CD, I can cut the bottom off,
Mm.
and that leaves a little stub, a trunk right there. And so it's very easy to take a washer and a screw, and you can screw that trunk right to the grid and have it hold in place. And so it's way easier than trying to wire, a bunch of skinny trees in. So that'll be a limited workshop. I think there's just going to be 6 spots in that workshop. I think there'll be 6 spots in the storm damaged flat top bald cypress workshop, and I think there'll be 10 spots in the care and refinement workshop. So people will be able to pick specific trees. We're going to have a website set up where you can see there'll be, trees available, and there'll be, people can, so if you want something smaller, you can pick something smaller. If you want a monster, you can pick a monster. And pretty much everything in between. So working
That's
on
cool.
that now. So no, well, I guess the forest workshop is just, it's going to be, I'm going to hand select all the forest material and group them. And then I'll have some extras if somebody wants to trade or something. But the other ones, you'll know exactly what tree you're getting well before the workshop. So.
Very cool. There's a lot of
Question about,
different. Oh,
I was going to ask a question just about seedlings real quick on the topic of setting wire. When do you first put wire on? Like how soon or what age of the sapling do you generally put your wire on first, and what are you focusing on with the wire
So,
application?
in this situation, I was looking for straight trunks. So I let the trunks develop, so the real thing I was looking for was a good radial root spread. So my trunks had to get big enough so the CD would girdle the trunks and create that root spread. So that was the first thing I did. I also, I didn't do just single trees, single seedlings through the CDs. I did pairs and trios. So I've got some natural groupings. So I bought the trees as 1-year-old seedlings, and I potted them up. I pruned the first growing season multiple times so that I had some branches. The first winter I wired, and then the following season I prune again, and then I wire again in the winter. I don't usually wire the seedlings in the summer. The bigger trees I'll wire twice. I can wire twice a year, in the summer with the foliation, and then in the winter, pretty much any time in the winter. If you got really cold temperatures, you probably ought to protect the tree after you put wire on the branches. So, but we get temperatures into the teens, sometimes, low teens and single digits. And I protect my trees that have just been collected, but once they're 1 year beyond collection, they stay out on the ground in some pretty cold temperatures. And I know old cypress are pretty tough, so they do pretty well.
I experienced that with their toughness, just, moving from Oregon and taking most of my trees with me, including both cypress, and then seeing them used as landscape plants in Ohio and finding that they actually grew all the way into Indiana around some of the lakes. I was like,
Mm.
oh wow, they're a lot more like stronger than I ever gave them credit for.
Southern
Because when I went to
Illinois.
Louisiana, it's this whole thing of, oh yeah, the battered bastards of trees, if you will, with the hurricanes and stuff. But then they're in different applications of climate where we got negatives last year and trees are still popping up this year, Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
crazy. I was like, oh,
if you go to nationals, there's the Eastman Arboretum, which is right
hmm,
on Lake Erie, and they have both pond cypress and bald cypress growing right there, a couple hundred yards off the lake, and they're almost specimen sized trees. They're not quite, they've been there a long time. So, and they are native all the way into southern Illinois. So
wow, I didn't realize that.
not too far past Indiana, but just a little bit into southern Illinois. I've seen pictures of a couple big ones there. Um,
Do
but
you find that pond cypress generally don't grow as far out of their habitat that you find them in, or is it more just they change? I've heard from science articles I've read that they maybe go through an amalgamation and change into a pond cypress or something or other, but there's no real evidence to prove that. Is that something you've seen or run into? Like you're collecting grounds, have you seen them in, let's say, Maryland or up more on the East Coast as far as pond cypress versus bald cypress?
I haven't really gone collecting, north of my state,
Hmm.
South Carolina. So I can't really speak to that. What I can tell you is in South Carolina and Georgia, and I suspect even Maryland, Virginia, you know what a Carolina Bay is?
I don't.
So a Carolina Bay is a series of thousands of depressions that I understand now they're blaming on a meteorite that hit a glacier and caused big chunks of ice to come and create these depressions. You should look it up. It's a real thing, but there's these, most of them now are gone because of farmers and, development and stuff like that, but there's still lots and lots of them. They're a shallow oval depression in South Carolina. To my knowledge, I've never found pond cypress outside of Carolina bays. The interesting thing about Carolina bays and then the lakes and rivers of South Carolina is they dry out every summer. And, when we had the podcast with Ryan, one of the things we talked about, and one of the things I tried to look up ahead of time was genetic testing. And my understanding is, and I really have a minuscule understanding of anything genetics, but they did some kind of marker testing and the trees had identical markers. So they just said they're the same. They're not different. But what's really odd is they are extremely different in physical characteristics, and I think it's because in Florida, a lot of the pond cypress are growing on limestone, and that is causing, less than perfect growing conditions. And so you see a lot of dwarfed trees, a lot of trees that are super old and only 5 feet tall. And, Mr. Ed Trout was talking, and he says there's places where they're growing together. Well, I don't ever see them together. One of the, I talked about Santee. There's a lake called Lake Marion down there, and there's a little place called Dingle Pond. And so I went and checked it out one day. Well, Dingle Pond is a Carolina bay full of pond cypress that is right next to the lake. There's one, they probably flood over into each other. You go on the lakeside, there's nothing but bald cypress. You don't see a single pond cypress. You go on to the Carolina Bay side, there's nothing but pond cypress, no balds. So
interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Pond cypress in South Carolina in the bays have developed thick bark to protect from fires. Where bald cypress have this thin exfoliating bark. So, I mean, pond cypress bark can be 2 inches thick, maybe more.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just crazy. They're much smaller trees. They have a distinctly different shape. I call it a wine bottle shape. They will start to taper, and then all of a sudden they go straight down. Where a bald cypress continues to taper and usually spreads at the base, creating to me a more attractive base. Generally speaking. So.
It does sound like there's a lot of mystery there about what is causing the difference between maybe different environmental factors like you mentioned.
I think it's environmental. And, that whole podcast thing, Kevin, did you go collect trees in Louisiana with Nate?
No, I've been to Louisiana. First time was doing a cleanup after Hurricane Katrina. We went on the bayou walks and I saw all that. So I was exposed to that. And
what were you doing out there at that time?
Me?
Yeah, I've never heard that story.
Oh, I was in high school and I did a bayou walk after we gutted houses because the water, it was crazy. I saw planes and boats in the yards that were, miles away from the water or airports. And it left an impression on me seeing those things like that, and also how the trees responded now, being as I'm a quote unquote horticulturist after finishing my degree, whatever that means. But no, to answer your question, I have not collected out there. I would love to, but I know that they were different than the trees I saw in Florida as regards of like how much Mother Nature's impacted them and how they grow. Like you were saying, the limestone versus some of the bogs and things in the bayous. I found them to be different.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting.
There's some, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Three Sisters Swamp. On the Black River in North Carolina between Lumberton and Wilmington, National Geographic did an article on these, old growth bald cypress trees. Long story short, there's 30 trees that are just like form an ancient cathedral. They're just absolutely amazing. They're almost all completely hollow. They found one tree. They tied a hammer to a bamboo pole 20 feet tall, tapping up the trees to see if they could find solid places. And they found one tree that was solid 25 feet up in the air to the center. And they were able to core it, and they were able to accurately date it through a professor in a university who was there doing the whole study and everything. And it was 2,624 years old or 40 years old.
Wow.
I forget.
25 feet up too.
Yeah, 25.
So it was hollow to 25 feet, and then they found heartwood up to 25 feet.
There was one section that was solid to the core. It was still on the other side. It was just solid to the core, and they were able to drill it to the core. It's my understanding. I think I'm right about that. So
wow, it's amazing.
Yeah. So there's
Sounds like a fun job.
Yeah, there's a guy that led all the expeditions to go try to do all that. He runs a guide service now. His name's Dr. Charles Captain Charles Robbins, not Doctor. So he's very, very interesting to listen to. But those trees are spectacular. I thought I knew old bald cypress trees. I've seen 1,500-year-old trees that were dated. They're very mature, but they're not ancient. And Brian, I know you worked with Dan, spent some time with Dan Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
I know ancient is his thing, and these trees are they're spectacular. They don't even look like cypress trees. You'd never look at them and say that's a 3,000-year-old tree. But what's really cool is I've got seedlings growing from the 2,600-year-old tree. I was allowed cones off of it. So I got about, 50 seedlings coming up.
So what area is that Three Sisters swamp from?
It's on the Black River between Lumberton and Wilmington, North Carolina, southeastern coast of North Carolina.
Do you need a boat or something to get out to it, or can you see it from land?
12-mile kayak ride. So it's a 12-mile paddle. You put in about 5 miles above the swamp, a couple miles to the swamp, and then take out to about 5 miles below. That's what it is now. There's a church you can go to and see the trees in the canopy in the distance, but you can't really get to them. So
I was just worried about people on Instagram being like, go, ruining the vine or something.
It's like a 5-mile kayaking each way that probably deters most people.
Oh yeah, the 12-mile kayak is an all-day adventure. And I've been 3 times. No, I'm sorry, I've been twice. Got my 3rd time planned, and I'm pretty good with directions and stuff, and I don't think I could find my way in. I know I couldn't find my way out. So even if I got in there, I'm not sure I could get out. So because you kind of go through the swamp and then you have to work your way back to the river. And so a guide's an important thing. So anybody can go and try it.
You all have alligators out there as well?
I don't think there's any alligators in that swamp. There's tons of alligators where I collect and stuff.
Life in the wild side.
You never had a run-in with them?
I've had a few run-ins.
What's that like? Ooh.
Well, one time I was out scouting trees with my wife, and a big female gator, I think protecting some young, got kind of aggressive with us. We were in the canoe, and she went under the canoe and bumped it a little bit, and then was holding her head above the water, looking at us, menacingly. And we had to immediately go back to the boat ramp because we both had dirtied ourselves. No, not really.
I was gonna say do a couple Hail Marys.
The ride was over at that point. We were both just feeling lucky we were alive. I've had lots of them come up next to the boat. Recently, so where I collect now is it's a duck pond that they're managing for duck hunting. And they're really doing a lot. They're killing the bald cypress trees. They came in and aerial sprayed all the big cypress trees in the middle of the pond to open it up so that they could better duck hunt. So
It's a bummer.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but my wife and my wife, oh my goodness, she's wonderful. She won't let me go to the swamp by myself. That's just a non-negotiable. So she'll go with me. And, she's pretty much, I can't step backwards when I'm walking with her around because I'll step on her. She's right behind me, But we had been out there and we had dug more trees than we should have. We were both really tired. And I don't know, have you ever heard an alligator bellow?
Isn't that kind of a guttural noise? Like,
Yeah,
I can't.
it kind of sounds like that car that just drove by, I think.
Yeah, it's a very low sound. You've probably seen pictures of the water vibrating on their backs. It's my understanding it's a territorial noise. Well, this was this summer and we were collecting and I was on the last tree. I think we dug 9 trees and that was entirely too many. And I was trying to get the last one out and an alligator bellowed maybe a half mile away, pretty good distance. And my wife says, okay, we're done. Let's go. Let's go. And she didn't use the words like that. She used other words.
Put it simply. Get that.
Yeah. So I'm like, let me finish, baby. That was way off in the distance, and then like 5 seconds later, another one bellowed, but still off in another direction, but even the same distance away. Long story short, after about 30 seconds, maybe 5 different alligators had bellowed, and the last one was maybe 50 feet from us.
Oh,
so
that's making me scared.
We were on shore, but he was out in the reeds. And I looked at her and I said, let's go. What are you waiting on?
At least they told you where they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this brings up another question. So John, I know you do a lot about cypress collecting in June, and I was wondering if there's any particular reason for that, because I imagine if you went in the winter, you'd have the advantage of these cold-blooded critters being a little less active.
Sure, you're not the only one that asked that question, and when I was first getting into bald cypress, Ken and I first did some collection and some experimenting, but Gary Marshall was a student of Von Banting, and he was teaching bald cypress in Atlanta conventions and things. And so I had talked to him, and he was a wintertime collector. Well, every time I tried to collect in the wintertime, I would get another cold snap. And even if I tried to protect the trees, they didn't live. So I tried the late winter collecting. I tried the early spring collecting, and I had 0 success, or I had very limited success, and I didn't want to kill trees. So one time I'm sitting there in a workshop with Gary, and Gary's saying, yeah, I can defoliate, wire, and repot all of these trees in the sun, midsummer, no problem. They just bud right back. And I said, I wonder if I can collect. So Ken and I started collecting in the summer, and it worked beautifully. If you collect in the first half of the summer, you remove all of the foliage, you remove 90% of the roots, cut the roots so hard that you'll be able to fit it in a bonsai pot. Keep it wet. Keep it moist. Keep the soil moist, keep the trunk damp, in total shade. And
are you doing a tray of water underneath?
Nope, not at first.
Oh, okay.
So let me back up. The very first trees I collect, I put into place in my koi pond I call the bog garden, and it's basically an area that I diverted water off the waterfall, and it's maybe 4, 5, 6 square feet, and it's pea gravel, and it just has a little bit of water exchange. So the first trees I collect and the best trees that I collect every year go into that pea gravel. Not potted, they just go directly into that pea gravel. They sit there all winter in the ice and the cold, doesn't make any difference. They grow roots so fast when I put them in there. Koi poop is magic, and
Yeah,
yeah.
nitrogen. Yeah.
So the rest of them I put in containers and I put in the shade. And then once they bud out, once they get maybe a 2-inch long shoot on them, I'll put them out under the shade in the shade house, where they're under 50% shade for a couple of weeks. Once they're about 6 inches long. So half the trees I collected in June now, this is mid-August, are already out in full South Carolina sun. So because they've got foot-long growth already on them. And
So then they made it basically.
Yeah, basically the ones that I collected in June are pretty much all out. The ones I collected in July, some of them are still transitioning. I collected about 65 trunks this year, and I have 5 trunks that I'm worried aren't going to live. So
wow, that's really good success rate though.
90%. And I collected probably 100 small trunks, just small size, thumb size, maybe double thumb size. And out of 100 of those, easily 96 or 97 lived. So I get really good results with summer collecting. I do not touch them for a year. I don't work them for a year. The ones that go in the bog garden, I repot around the 1st of March the following year. But I typically let them go. Once they're repotted, I let them go until June, and then I might work them in June, use them as workshop trees in June.
Gotcha.
Wow.
So a question that I have wondered personally is, have you had any students who say they're coming from out of state to visit you and they collect bald cypress with you, or you give them a freshly collected tree, and then they report that it works well for the recovery of the plant even in their colder climate that has a shorter growing season?
Well, Jim Doyle has taken several home and never had any issues to Pennsylvania. I've had trees go to Indiana. I've had, I've got a few followers that are doing summer collecting in Louisiana with great success. I think it's very doable. I don't know about Florida. I think one of the important factors is that the trees are vigorous. Most of the time that's the case, but I told you where I'm collecting, and some of my trees are not as vigorous as others, have dead tops in them and stuff. And those are usually a little slower to recover. They might take 2 years to recover to get to a point where I'm comfortable saying, let's work on them. Where the strong, vigorous ones are absolutely ready to go at a year's time.
Just to recap, you were saying that you defoliate, you dig up, defoliate, and cut hard on the roots, and that makes me think that you're defoliating, so that lowers the energy expenditure to stress them out more because they don't have anything stress out that was already there, right? So they're not using more energy to create all the things they need to do. Cutting, so they're producing both at the same time. Is that from my understanding of what you're seeing
Yeah,
as
and
far as roots and foliage?
explain a little bit further. I probably shouldn't have used the word defoliate. I debranch the tree. I take all of the branches off the tree. I have a trunk and a root base, and that's where I'm starting from. I find if I keep low branches, even if I cut them short, they're never as vigorous as the new branches. The new branches grow and develop so much faster. The old branches just kind of sit there and piddle. So they end up hindering design choices. So I start with a clean slate. I remove everything. I might leave a couple leaves so I can kind of monitor, leaves growing, bald cypress are famous for having buds straight off the trunk. So I might leave 3 or 4 leaves that I can see and kind of monitor. And, as long as they're staying green, I know I'm in good shape. But yeah, so I'm basically taking a giant cutting. It's got roots. I've cut the roots drastically back. In the swamp where I dig them, there's no soil. So let me back up. Where I dig, there's a layer of muck about 10 inches to maybe 12 inches deep, and it's just roots. It's just tons and tons and tons of roots, some alive, some decomposing. Below that is kaolin. Kaolin is a very dense clay. So some of the roots will penetrate the kaolin, but not far because it's dry. Once you get in there, there's nothing for the roots, they can't. So the trees I collect have no taproot. They go 6 inches into the kaolin and that's it. The root just dies. It just stops. So that makes this particular place really good for me because I get super lateral root. I'm able to collect trees with really good lateral roots. And
That's interesting. Yeah.
So, I can use a handsaw or a sawzall, and it doesn't take very long, to cut the tree. And then it usually takes 2 people because you have to bend the tree over, and you do have to cut some of the roots going down into the kaolin, but there's no 10-inch taproot going down there like there might be in other places where I've tried to collect cypress trees. And
Oh, I was wondering, do you think it's more of like, well, I wouldn't think summer dormancy happens for y'all until you hit July or August, right?
yeah. So I
So
don't
it's not even that. Okay.
No. I think the trees are just super vigorous. And if you cut everything off and say, hey, live, they say, oh, okay.
Light a couple candles, do a seance or something.
Bill Valvena says it well. He says trees want to live. And
Yeah.
that's certainly the case with these trees. I've collected other trees that didn't want to live so much. So,
As you're collecting trees now and doing all these things that you have been doing, is there any i- ideas or ideals that you put into yourself for preservation? I know you all had the floods and then you had the fires this year. Is
In
that
South
partake
Carolina?
of, yeah, there was, what fire was that? The Table Rock, I think. Something
yeah,
like that. I can't remember. It was
the
pretty
big-
bad, and
it was very bad.
I know it was man-made, but either way, it still burned a lot of stuff.
The,
Does that influence how you approach your collecting as well in relation to
you know,
preservation and things in that way?
outside of the bald cypress trees, which where I'm collecting from, I feel like I'm doing them a favor because, the people that are managing that land don't want them there. And that's the only reason they let me come. They don't want those trees there. So they're happy for me to come in and take them. But outside of that, 95% of my collecting are seedlings. And I would, if I could get away with it, I would be planting, several hundred bald cypress seedlings where I'm collecting from every year. Every spring I'd be out there collecting them because I think it's a great, nursery for these trees, this particular one spot. I hate to say it, my collecting spot's about 200 yards long. And that's the only, that's the only real place I have to dig trees in a way that where I'm comfortable with. I don't feel like I'm, needing to get permission or whatever.
Right.
So,
Like it's always that give and take, right? It's like
yeah,
conservation and preservation and
yeah, it really is. I don't want to be, one of the people responsible for, creating the situation Japan has now where you can't, there's no trees left to collect or it's completely illegal to collect them. So it's a little bit different what I'm doing and they're doing. My trees are, decades old and their trees are centuries old typically, but there's still some similarity there. And I certainly, I want to make sure that I give these trees as good a home as possible so that, I'm taking them from where they are. And even though they may not have had a long-term situation there, but I want them to, I don't want to kill trees. I know that's the famous saying, the cost of doing bonsai is killing trees, or the tuition to bonsai school is killing trees. But I've killed a bunch, but I try not to. I want them to be successful, and I feel like I have very good rates with the bald cypress. If I didn't, I wouldn't be collecting the number of trees I collect. So, and it's a limited resource, in another year or two, and there's not going to be anything left for me to collect there, and I'll have to find a new spot.
It's that'll be an interesting conversation with yourself, right? At the end of the day, like, okay, I have to find a new spot, but then that new spot may become not available. And then, it's like, oh, okay, do you have a limit of trees that you're like, okay, enough for right now. I'll sit away for a couple of years, not collect, or have you ever thought about that?
What I can care for.
Okay.
I
How many
need,
trees do you have right now?
I collected more cypress trees this year, mainly because all the trees I have are committed currently to workshops, to a few friends, so if you came to my house right now and said, hey, I want to buy a cypress tree, I have like 3 that I could sell to you.
Oh, wow.
So it's not, next year I'll have a bunch, once these are a year old, but it just happened between and I reserved some extra trees for the workshops. I want to make sure those people have an excellent choice. And so some of those trees will probably come back because I'll have more than what's needed. But, I absolutely, I just expanded my garden, but it wasn't to be able to keep more trees. It was to be able to put some trees in the ground, and it was to be able to spread out the trees that I have, because I had too many in too small a space and it wasn't giving them optimum growing conditions. So I don't want more trees. I need better, more space to give the current trees better conditions. So.
Do you know of anybody ever having, say, they have land and they're in the bonsai, but they don't know what to do with it? Have you ever seen anyone like partition their land out and do kind of like a community garden space where people can maybe rent a piece of the land to grow on there or establish trees that way? Have you ever seen that in your experience?
I haven't, but a lot of my bonsai experience, I live out in the country, and
Okay.
there's not that kind of community nearby. But why wouldn't that could work?
I thought about that for a while. I was like, why wouldn't it work?
Somebody willing to do it. You're going to have a generous landowner.
Real long-term plan.
Yeah.
It's amazing. They grow a lot faster than you think them to, seedlings, growing them in the ground, whatever, a decade is, longer than you need with a lot of them. I can develop pretty nice tridents in 5 years from seedlings.
Is there anything special, John, about the area that you do your ground growing? Are you adding any fertilizer or any compost to the soil, or how are you maintaining that area through multiple generations of trees using it up?
So I live in the sand hills of South Carolina. So my soil is sand. So I don't really, I used to amend it, with various different things. I don't really do that now, but what I do is, sorry.
Thank you.
Is use a lot of mulch. So I think that I use pine bark mulch, and I think it breaks down and provides some nutrients there. I really don't even fertilize the trees in the ground. So I just make sure they are able to maintain moisture, and I get amazing results. Trees in the ground.
So every year or two, you'd say you're applying a thick layer of mulch in that area?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when I saw your garden, it must have been in March because I think it was my spring break. And so
Okay.
I didn't really see any weeds there, but I imagine in the growing season, the mulch would also help prevent that to make it like lower maintenance.
Well, 90% of what my wife and I do is pull weeds.
Oh,
We are
Yeah.
yeah,
ex-
they're still there.
weed pulling experts. I could present on that topic at any, I my wife tells me that I should make anybody that comes to the garden, I should hand them a bucket and say, "Look, fill this up with weeds and I'll give you a tree."
That's a good
Sounds
deal.
sounds like Ryan got lucky. Didn't have to pull
Yeah.
weeds.
You can make a contest out of it.
Yeah. So, but we pull a lot of weeds. We pull a lot of weeds, and the mulch certainly helps. Helps control the weeds in the situations where I'm growing in the ground. I have a ton of small trees. I'm trying to make a lot of small trees, so I have lots and lots and lots of trays of various elms and cypress trees and maples and tridents and weeding those little stupid 3-inch pots. I have to spend a portion of every day weeding. So
Do
not,
it for love, though, right?
not always fun,
Mhm.
but I don't know. Give them the nutrients they want and the weeds grow.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Don, I got one last question. We've been almost talking to you for almost 90 minutes, so I appreciate your time. One last question I have is, from your time when you started to now, did you ever expect yourself in reflection now, it's a reflection question, that you'd be where you're at? Or did you ever envision that you'd be where you're at?
Well, I don't think I'm anywhere. So,
Okay.
I'm just you guys, just a little
Okay.
further down the road.
Mhm.
People are so kind to me all the time and they tell me crazy things, they come and visit and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't talk. I'm a little awestruck," but I'm like, "Oh, please don't, I'm just you guys, I'm just a longtime bonsai lover, hobbyist, and uh, I look at my trees and I really don't think they're that good. I look at other, a lot of people's trees and I'm going, "Oh man, that's fabulous." And I look at mine, but I get less enjoyment from finished trees than I do
Mhm.
collecting and growing and creating. That's the real passion for me. Spending
Mhm.
a whole weekend wiring some tree that I've had for 30 years is great, but
Mhm.
golly, it's tedious too. And
Mhm.
it's a lot of work and, sometimes the results don't change all that much, but,
Mhm.
um, every time you touch a tree, it's got to get better. If you can do that, then you'll have good trees. So,
Yeah, I guess if it ain't, it better be a landscape plant, man.
Well, John, we really appreciate you making the time, and I know that this is just scratching the surface of the kind of information and stories that you have to share with people.
John,
It
wonderful
was,
meeting you and talking with you. Thank
yeah,
you.
great. It was great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
But
Hope to
I
see
would
you
love to
around
have
the
you on
Bonsai
again
world.
sometime, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I know we didn't even talk about your slab plantings and all the forest planting stuff that you've taught me, so I look forward to hearing more about that in a future episode.
Well, let's do it.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Have a good night.
The Bonsai Time podcast has been horticulturally crafted by Kevin Ferris, Ryan Houston, and Kelly Louie. And if you want even more bonsai magic, don't forget to check out the episode notes and full show extras at bonsaitimepodcast.com. If you're loving the show, help us grow like a thriving juniper. Like, subscribe, share, and spread the bonsai love. Got questions, ideas, or fan mail? Send it to bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. Your message might make it onto a future episode. We're everywhere you scroll. Just search Bonsai Time Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And catch our TikTok snips at Bonsai Time Pod. Follow the team on Instagram at Kevin_Ferris Bonsai, at Bonsai with Kelly, and Ryan at Invivo Bonsai and InvivoBonsai.com. Thanks for tuning in. Keep pruning, keep growing, and always bonsai on.